A grand banquet was underway in a large building. The guests whispered amongst themselves, discussing how Mr. Lion had brought his daughter this time, seemingly intending to introduce her to Mr. He. They had heard that his daughter was a level 2 lop-eared rabbit, while Mr. He was a level 3 alpha wolf. The crowd doubted that he would even spare her a glance. Suddenly, Mr. He made an appearance, apologizing and announcing that he had no plans to marry yet. Indeed, he was a level 3 alpha wolf, suppressing his pheromones with medication and serving as the CEO of He Corporation. Behind his back, some women whispered that wolves were known to be extraordinarily loyal, choosing one mate for life. They wondered which Omega might have the power to capture his heart. At that moment, he was already weary of the delicate, enchanting Omegas endlessly paraded before him, each hoping to secure some benefit. Yet he could not have imagined that an unforgettable love awaited him just around the corner. He decided to retreat to the snow-covered peaks of the Novella Mountains for some rest. His compass broke, and after notifying someone by phone, he was assured that a helicopter would be dispatched shortly. Suddenly, a young man on horseback appeared before him, asking how he had ended up there. This was Tinui, a level 3 Omega, a Napoleon cat breed. His pheromones were potent, reminiscent of strong alcohol. He worked as the head of the journalism department for the League of Allied States. When Tinui appeared before him, so vibrant and full of life, he realized for the first time what it meant to fall in love at first sight. Tinui asked if he was lost, remarking that it was easy to lose one's way in these endless snows. Even the most advanced gadgets couldn't compare to a horse that instinctively knew its path. Tinui offered He a ride on his horse, saying he would take him down to the tourist complex below. He mounted the horse, and Tinui told him to hold on tightly, warning that if he fell, it wouldn't be his fault. Together, they rode through the snowy mountains. He informed his contact that he no longer needed the helicopter. In the brief time they spent together, feelings began to blossom between them. However, Tinui was soon called away on an assignment and had to leave abruptly. He barely managed to give Tinui a bracelet made of stones he had bought from a local souvenir shop. After Tinui's departure, all contact with him was lost. 2 years passed, and he began to believe he would never see his first love, his kitten, again. But fate smiled upon him. Tinui's family encountered unforeseen business troubles, forcing Tinui to return home. He immediately came to propose, promising to resolve all their problems. He believed a happy marriage awaited them, but he could never have anticipated that this day would mark the beginning of a tragedy. 2 years later, they finally married. Immediately after the wedding, when they were alone, Tinui pushed He to the ground and aimed a gun at him. He asked if he was so repulsive to him. He had thought their feelings were mutual. He told Tinui that if he found him so detestable, he could have simply said so. There was no need to force himself. He asked if it was all because of his family's problems and whether Tinui had been coerced into marrying him. He confessed that he had waited for him all those 2 years, only to find it had all been a game to Tinui. He added that, regardless of everything, his father had already sold him to him. So why pretend to be innocent? He embraced Tinui, who pleaded with him to let go. At that moment, he had no idea he was about to lose the person he loved most in the world in the most horrifying way imaginable. A funeral took place. The attendees trembled at the sight of Director He, whispering that this was the funeral of his legal partner. Even if their relationship had been strained, decorum had to be maintained. He approached Tinui's elder brother Tinlan and asked for permission to take him. He argued that since Tinui had been his husband, it was his family's duty to bury him. Tinlan threw a glass at him, shattering it against his temple, and ordered him to leave. Tinlan declared that his brother was dead, yet he still wouldn't leave him alone. He replied that Tinui was there and that he didn't want to cause a scene. He simply begged for permission to see him one last time. Tinlan sneered, saying that so he did know Tinui was there. He mocked He for barging into the farewell hall with his entourage, disturbing even Tinui's eternal rest. He placed a flower on the floor, knelt, and bowed before Tinlan, pleading to see him. Everyone was shocked to see such a powerful man kneeling in public. Cameras quickly captured the scene. It was a sight no one had expected to witness. He stated that Tinui was his elder brother and that he respected him, wanting to avoid using force. Tinui had always told him to control his temper, to negotiate peacefully first, and to show respect. He emphasized that he was trying to be respectful, but if Tinlin continued to deny him, he would have no choice but to compel him. Tinlin relented, saying that if he was so insistent, he could take a look. He requested that the reporters and his men wait outside. He did not want anyone to disturb Tinui's peace. Tinlin retorted that for 3 years he had ignored him, refused to listen, and shown no interest. Yet now that he was dead, he was suddenly playing the part of a grieving lover. He asked why he was putting on this charade. He approached Tinui's photograph, then the coffin. Seeing it empty, he demanded to know where Tinui was. Turning to Tinlan, he demanded to know where Tinui was hidden and accused him of conspiring to deceive him. Tinlan mocked him, remarking that he could actually feel pain. He pushed Tinlan, once again demanding to know where Tinui was. Tinlan coldly replied that Tinui was indeed dead. He asked where the body was, and Tinlan revealed there was no body. Tinui had burned alive. He asked if even his bones were gone. Tinlan explained that while human bones are difficult to incinerate, the agony had been so intense that Tinui reverted to his original form. He snatched a box from Tinlan's hands. Tinlan reminded him of how small Tinui had been in his true form. Tiny, no larger than a palm, a short-legged, fluffy kitten. Tinlan added that the fire had been so fierce that not even bones remained. He had searched and searched but found only this. He opened the box to find a charred tuft of fur. He remembered how Tinui had always feared fire, how even a minor burn on his finger had caused him unbearable pain. And yet, he had burned alive, transformed into a kitten, and perished. Reflecting on their ill-fated marriage, he realized he had brought Tinui nothing but suffering. Upon returning home, He's butler informed him that young Master Gu had sent him 2 level 2 Omegas and invited him to a party that evening. He declined and asked where Tinui was. The butler replied that Tini was in the upstairs bedroom and that his rut had begun. The Omegas might help ease his condition. He repeated that he had no need for them. He declared that Tinui was his beloved, and no matter what happened, he was not searching for anyone else. He instructed the butler to send the 2 Omegas away. When he entered the bedroom, he immediately tried to kiss Tinui. The young man pushed him away in refusal, prompting he to leave. Tinui called after him, asking him not to go and offering to pour him a drink. He responded that it was unnecessary. He asked what Tinui thought of him and stated that if he found him so repulsive, he could simply say so. Tinui asked if he would return in the evening for dinner. He replied that he would not, as Tinui only ruined his appetite. Alphas by nature have a heightened libido, and for a level 3 alpha wolf, it was even stronger. Whenever his partner was near, his rut began. Yet even touching Tinui was forbidden. This had been the reality for 3 years. He could not comprehend why Tinui so diligently resisted. Over the 3 years of their marriage, the moments of intimacy between them could be counted on one hand, and even then, only when Tinui initiated it. Toward evening, he was on the phone, reiterating that he would not attend the party, claiming that such gatherings were always filled with strange people. His conversation partner argued that having a husband was no excuse to avoid entertainment, especially for a first-class alpha. The caller teased, asking if he planned to become a monk because of him. Suddenly, one of the Omegas approached he and asked why he had instructed the butler to send them away. The Omega added that they could help, as it must be hard for he to restrain himself. He thought to himself that he was loyal to his marriage and had no intention of cheating or taking lovers. During his ruts, with no one to assist him, he endured it alone. Meanwhile, Tinui seemed entirely indifferent. Abruptly, he told his caller to move the party to his house and to invite as many girls and boys as possible. When Tinui came downstairs to the guests, they asked if he was He's partner and whether he would introduce them. He replied that there was no need. They simply had a business arrangement. A man wrapped his arms around He, commenting that he seemed slightly drunk and suggesting they take a break in his room. The 2 of them walked past Tinui. He thought to himself that Tinui was always like this. He never said a kind word to him. One day, Tinui approached He and informed him that he had just received an assignment and would have to leave that evening. Out of the blue, Tinui asked He if he wanted to touch his ears. He wondered if Tinui was finally beginning to thaw. He responded that Tinui was in a rush and suggested they discuss it when he returned. He could hardly believe the day had finally come. Tinui also couldn't believe it, as he planned to return just in time for their third wedding anniversary. He envisioned taking Tinui on a round-the-world cruise, arranging a romantic candlelit dinner during their journey. He was certain his husband would be delighted, but all he received was news of Tinui's death. He had perished, sacrificing himself. Tinlin revealed that the assignment notice had been a forgery. No reporters had been dispatched there at all. Someone had deliberately lured Tinui to the location, stripped him of his equipment and means of communication. The conflict had erupted near an elementary school, and Tinui died in the flames, saving children. He demanded to know who was responsible. He was told that it remained unclear, but it was certain there had been a spy within Tinui's team. Tinlin accused he of being the true culprit, claiming he had pushed Tinui to his death. He reminded he that they had been married for 3 years, and during that time, he had tormented him. On that fateful day, he had brought strangers into their home, flaunting them in front of Tinui, hosting a party with dancers and socialites. That was the final straw, and Tinui accepted the assignment. He asked if Tinlan thought he had forced Tinui to leave. He explained that it had all been for appearances. He wanted Tinui to react in some way, to soften and stop being so cold toward him. Tinlan retorted that Tinui had already been in a fragile mental state before their marriage. The doctor had warned that his depression was so severe he might end his life at any moment. Tinlan accused he of insisting on the marriage just to provoke and torment Tinui, then struck him. Tinlan demanded to know how he could have lived with Tinui for 3 years without realizing he was ill. Tinlan revealed that Tinui's ears had been damaged in an explosion, leaving him hard of hearing, and yet he had never noticed. He questioned whether he was even aware of Tinui's old leg injury, which left him unable to stand for long periods or tolerate cold weather. He dared to deny it. He admitted that he had known nothing at all. Not only had he been unaware of Tinui's hearing loss, but he had also mocked him when he didn't respond. Not only had he been ignorant of Tinui's injured legs, but he had also insisted that Tinui accompany him to a reception. Tinui had spent half the evening on his feet, collapsed, and humiliated himself in front of everyone. Not only had he failed to recognize Tinui's depression, but he had deliberately provoked him, torturing him with indifference. He had pushed Tinui to take the assignment in the conflict zone. Now he was certain he had driven him to his death. But he was Tinui's husband. He was supposed to love and protect him, to always be there for him and treat him with respect. Instead, he had sent him from one hell into another, his own hands delivering him to his doom. Every time Tinui left on an assignment, he had naively assumed they had plenty of time ahead, that their conversations could wait for another day. He had imagined baking Tinui his favorite chestnut pie the next time they met, opening his heart to him, and finally building a happy life together. But now, there would never be a next time. His kitten had burned in the flames, leaving behind only a small, charred bundle. In the fire, Tinui had silently asked for his forgiveness, knowing he could not return. He had regretted pointing a gun at he on their wedding night. Tinui had believed the problem was within himself. He feared physical touch so deeply that it might have led to violence, but he had never had the chance to explain. He had resigned himself to the life he had been given. Tinui thought that if there were a next life, he no longer wanted to love he. He was tired and only wanted to live quietly on his own. In his final moments, he transformed into a kitten, silently said goodbye to he, and was engulfed by the flames. When he opened the box that Tinlan had given him, he found a single bead inside. He realized it was from the bracelet of stones he had gifted Tinui in the mountains. Then the sound of his anguished, inconsolable sobs echoed throughout the entire estate. But Tinui would never hear them. 6 months had passed. He's assistant could hardly believe what he had become. He had lost so much weight he was unrecognizable, his arm was broken, and he had even lost a finger. It pained the assistant to look at him. The assistant asked if he truly intended to go to Wingsuit. He replied that it was his last chance. Wingsuit flights were an extreme sport, with a mortality rate of 30%. People were literally defying the heavens. Yet, there were always those willing to go to the end, no matter the cost, all because of an incredible legend. It claimed that if one jumped from the cliff, made a wish, and landed alive, the wish would not come true. But if one died, the wish would be granted. Such was the price of this deal with the heavens. He prayed to God, asking if his wish could be heard, to let him die. He also begged to have his kitten returned. A month later, headlines reported his death. He had crashed. After the failed jump, he awoke in his bedroom. He looked at the date and realized he had succeeded. At that moment, they had not yet met, and he had a chance to make things right. He was certain this time he would save Tinui. He noticed that after his reincarnation, the stone from the bracelet had remained with him, and his previously severed finger had regrown, though it bore a scar. He wondered if it was a warning from the heavens. His assistant informed him that the spoiled heir of Chanmao technology had been photographed working at the scandalous club White Horse. When confronted, he had lost his temper and claimed it was just a hobby. He asked if there was any news about the Chi family. The assistant clarified if he meant the family involved in real estate and whether he was asking about the young master or the head of the family. He replied that he was interested in their youngest son, Tinui. The assistant explained that Tinui spent most of his time abroad and had a spotless reputation, with no involvement in scandals, except for one incident that concerned he. 2 days ago, Tinui had called to congratulate his father on his 60th birthday. However, the call had been anything but polite, and the man had been furious. He asked what Tinui had said. The assistant explained that the man hadn't answered the call, so Tinui had left a message. In the message, he had referred to his father as old man, and asked if it wasn't time for him to head to heaven already, given that reaching 60 was no small feat. He chuckled, remarking that Tinui had always been a sharp tongue in his younger years. He wondered how Shifan hadn't dropped dead from anger right then and there. He instructed the assistant to contact his secretary and have the recording sent to him. The assistant reminded he that in an hour, Ms. Dawn, his stepmother, was holding a press conference. She was accusing him of stealing her son's achievements and claiming the ZSE search engine was actually his creation. He told the assistant to remind him 10 minutes before the conference began and to book him the next available flight to Novella. He thought that, based on the timeline of his past life, Tinui was likely now in a conflict zone in Novella. He informed his assistant that he would be abroad for some time and granted him indefinite leave with full salary. He also ordered him not to discuss his plans with anyone. In their youth, his father, Shifan, had tried to win the affections of Tinui's mother. When she rejected him, he continued to harass her, resorting to vile tactics. Her reputation had been ruined, forcing her to leave the country. He mused that Tinui's call might have been driven by lingering resentment, a desire to take revenge for his mother. He wondered what Tinui had looked like while arguing. Did he squint his eyes, or did he glare with fury, as if in punishment? Tinui had left no trace of himself behind, no audio, no photos. He hadn't heard Tinui's voice in over a year. He called Tinui, and when he answered, he simply said he missed him terribly. The endless longing transformed into an uncontrollable desire, and Tinui's bold voice only fueled the flames. The suppressed yearning of 4 years, the anguish of losing his beloved, all of it poured out at once. Over the phone, he was informed that the press conference was about to begin. He vowed that this time, he would do everything possible to give Tinui the best life, to make him his completely, in both body and soul. Shifan and Dawn began the press conference. Suddenly, he entered the room and all eyes turned to him. Taking the microphone from his father, he apologized and stated that he didn't have much time, as more important matters awaited him. He promised to keep it brief. He announced that, effective immediately, he was resigning as CEO of the corporation and severing all ties with the He family. From that moment on, their affairs were no longer his concern. He expressed his hope that when he returned, everything would be in order. He arrived in the Novella Mountains. His companions informed him that rain mixed with snow was expected that evening. Spending the night outdoors in such weather would be pure suicide, especially since his belongings had been stolen. They told him they couldn't go any further, as they valued their lives. He offered to pay 10 times more to ensure he reached his destination before nightfall, adding that anyone unwilling to continue could leave, and he would settle with them as agreed. They suggested at least stopping to restock food and water supplies. He agreed. At a shop stop, he thought to himself that they were already halfway to the journalist's base and, if they didn't delay, would arrive on time. Suddenly, he heard someone call out Tinui's name. A young man approached Tinui and asked how their funds were, mentioning he had seen some salmon in the store and asking if Tinui wanted any. Tinui asked if the salmon included the belly cut. The young man replied that, of course, it did, bigger than his even, and then headed into the shop. Tinui turned to He and asked if he hadn't looked at him enough yet. He asked what someone like him was doing in a place like this. He began to cry, thinking that his kitten was just the same as before. At that moment, a ringing sound filled He's ears, and time seemed to stop. Before his eyes, there was only Tinui. He continued to stare at him, and Tinui asked if he was all right. Only when Tinui approached him and the frozen moment resumed did he finally feel alive again. Tinui wondered what was wrong with this alpha. His face was so cold and beautiful, yet his eyes seemed filled with sorrow, with such deep despair. Tinui asked if he reminded He of someone and remarked that he seemed truly upset. He replied that he was searching for his beloved. Tinui asked if his beloved had gone missing, offering to take a photo to show around and ask others to keep an eye out. He took his hand and said softly that he had already found him. If anyone else had dared to say something like that to Tinui, they would have received a proper punch. Yet, for some reason, he couldn't bring himself to strike He. He wondered if it was because of He's eyes, so penetrating, so filled with grief. Tinui thought to himself that this must just be He's way of charming people, and he told himself not to fall for it so easily. He said that He's eyes might be beautiful, but such lines were a dime a dozen. He added that he reminded him of an old man. He responded that if Tinui liked his eyes, then he could gaze into them forever. Tinui told him to let go, saying he didn't care and didn't want to deal with him. He mentioned that he had been robbed. Tinui thought to himself, "What does that have to do with me? It's not my fault." He asked where it had happened. He explained that it had been at the station. A young boy had noticed he was hungry and kindly offered him half a baguette. But when he returned from the restroom, the boy and his bag were gone. His backpack, along with all his gear, had vanished. Tinui remarked that this sounded like the work of a petty thief. For them, wealthy tourists like he were easy prey, a delicious piece of cake. Tinui said the items were probably gone for good, but promised to have someone check the black market for his documents. Tinui realized that he really liked the sound of He's voice. He handed He some money, noting that it seemed like he hadn't eaten in a while. He accepted the money and thanked him, admitting that he was indeed in a difficult situation. Tinui also gave him some candies, joking that it was to keep him alive so that the next time he got robbed, he could at least ask the thief to leave him some sweets. Tinui told him to give them back if he didn't want them, but he asked who said he didn't want them. He ate one candy and slipped the rest into Tinui's pocket. Tinui couldn't shake the feeling that he'd known He for years, as if they hadn't seen each other in a very long time. He asked if they'd met before. He replied that they had never met, and added that he could see his attempts at courtship weren't very original either. Tinui thought to himself that he looked like a true widower, as if he had just lost his wife. Tinui finished his cigarette but couldn't find a trash bin. He walked over and he took the cigarette stub from him, saying he'd throw it away for him. Something told Tinui that the cigarette stub would likely never make it to the trash. He asked if Tinui thought he would do something strange with his cigarette. Tinui wondered if he could read his thoughts. Tinui asked what strange thing he could possibly do. Check his DNA from the saliva? Looking at He, Tinui realized that this wasn't the gaze of a typical flirt. He took Tinui's hand again and asked if he was afraid of him. Tinui realized that He's gaze was that of a predator who had found his prey and had no intention of letting it go. Tinui wondered if he had been looking at him like that the whole time, and whether, when he turned away, he had studied him just as intently. He apologized for seeming to upset him. He thought to himself that when Tinui was angry, he looked like a small leopard, fierce and striking. He had caught Tinui off guard, but he'd only gotten angry, not scared. This meant he wasn't yet afraid of touch. The catastrophe had not yet occurred. He said he thought Tinui was going to fall and had only wanted to steady him. Tinui wondered how many personalities he had. He swung at him with his fist, thinking he seemed like he was just trying to seduce him. Tinui tried to punch He, but he dodged. Frustrated, Tinui turned and walked away. He ran his fingers over Tinui's half-smoked cigarette, lit it, and brought it to his lips, as if he were kissing his beloved. Tinui entered a cafe, and his colleague, Fan, teased him, saying he'd better hurry or he might choke on his drool. Tinui grabbed the rabbit by the ears. Fan shouted, "Help! I've been grabbed by an evil spirit." Another member of Tinui's team, Monkey, an alpha monkey, asked why Fan was so scared. Rosalind, also part of the team and an alpha snake, remarked that Fan's ears were so soft and asked if she could touch them. Teeny warned her to be careful or risk making him bald. Fan replied that only Teeny was always kind to him. Another coworker, Gege, began teasing Tinui, but Tinui quickly shut him down. Tinui broke Gege's arm, remarking that it wasn't such a high price to pay for touching him. Onlookers whispered to one another, wondering who this man was. They had never seen such a ruthless Omega before. Someone else commented that he was the head of the journalists team. At 25, he had already become the head of the journalism department for the League of Allied States. In his 7 years working abroad, he had been to numerous war zones and had faced death more than once. He had won 3 championship belts in international mixed martial arts competitions and excelled in hand-to-hand combat, especially at long distances. It was clear that messing with him was a mistake. Whether he was angry or in a good mood, any alpha who displeased him could end up on their knees, begging for mercy and calling him daddy. Watching from his car, he observed the scene in the cafe. Now he saw what Tinui had been like before their marriage. Confident, strong, charismatic, yet full of youthful energy and charm. A little rough around the edges, sure, but still polite enough to ask if the man had finished his meal before breaking his arm. Not a kitten, but a true and enchanting little lion cub. But what had happened to him? Why had he become so reserved, so timid, and so afraid of touch? Around the corner, he spotted the man who had been bothering Tinui earlier and began to follow him. Suddenly, Mosin appeared, a fellow alpha whose primary form was an eagle. He was Tinui's adopted younger brother and a member of his team. During their conversation, Tinui asked Mosin if everything had been taken care of. Mosin replied, yes. Other members of the team informed Mosin that someone had been harassing his brother. A brazen hyena had dared to touch him and paid dearly with a broken arm. Mosin asked who had done it and declared that he would kill them. Tinui sighed and asked if he was at it again, reminding him that he had told him not to always talk about fights and killings. Mosin relented, saying that if Tinui didn't like it, he wouldn't do it anymore. Tinui added that it wasn't just him. It wouldn't please his future Omega either. Mosin stubbornly replied that he wouldn't have an Omega. Suddenly, Fan snatched a carrot from Tinui's plate. Tinui asked the rabbit what he was doing. Fan replied that he was feeling down and intended to eat Tinui's entire meal. Tinui didn't mind, saying that fried carrots with celery wouldn't even tempt a dog. Out of nowhere, Mosin told Tinui that something didn't feel right. Tinui admitted he had noticed it too, but they couldn't leave without him. He added that his neck was burning and his eye was twitching. He told everyone to wrap things up. They had to leave. Meanwhile, Gege informed his group about the hot-headed young man he'd seen in the cafe. They decided to act that evening, planning to steal their supplies and gear. The Alphas would be killed, and the Omega would be taken. One of the men asked their leader what to do with Tinui, asking if they should kill him. The leader scoffed, calling him a fool, and said that he liked Tinui. The others didn't matter, but Tinui was to belong to him. Another man argued that Tinui was too risky, too difficult to handle. The leader dismissed his concerns, saying they just needed to clip the wild kitten's claws and give him a proper taming. He observed these men from the shadows. He recalled how, in his past life, Tinui had been gravely injured during a major raid in the Novella conflict zone. While protecting his comrades, Tinui's ears and legs had been severely damaged. He never fully recovered and became disabled before the age of 30. That was the start of all his suffering. Checking the date, he realized that it seemed the attack was destined to happen tonight. Recognizing who their leader was, he decided to deal with him first. He picked up a bat and crept closer to them. From their conversation, he deduced that there was also an ambush planned. Realizing that the ambush posed an even greater threat, he decided he needed to stop everyone here. If even one of them escaped, Tinui would face serious danger. One of the group members remarked that Tinui and his team had already fled far ahead. The leader told them to let them go, noting that this wasn't the best place for an attack. They could intercept them halfway. Another member questioned whether they really intended to capture them, pointing out that Tinui was a high-ranking figure in the League. If he disappeared, he would definitely be searched for. The leader explained that Tinui had long-standing issues with the leadership. Last year, he had publicly humiliated William at a meeting. He doubted anyone would bother looking for him. He recalled that, in his past life, when he had tried to investigate Tinui's death, William had actively sabotaged his efforts. William had been Tinui's direct supervisor and had significantly advanced his career after Tinui's death. The leader announced that they would set out in half an hour and ordered them to prepare their weapons. Suddenly, he sprang from the shadows and struck Gege with the bat. He covered Gege's mouth to prevent him from shouting and slammed him to the ground. Grabbing his hand, he asked if this was the hand he had used to touch Tinui, then broke it. He demanded to know how many people were involved in the ambush. Gege stammered that he didn't know. He responded that if Gege was useless, there was no need to keep him intact, then kicked him in the face and took a photo of him with his phone. He tapped on the window of the sleeping driver's vehicle. He told the driver that the trash had been loaded and he could leave, warning that the snowfall would soon block the mountain roads. He vowed that tonight he would save Tinui and protect his legs and ears from harm. He retrieved a weapon, reflecting on the piles of guns and military equipment. It confirmed his suspicion that this was a gang of looters operating in war zones worldwide, making their money through theft and murder. He wouldn't let them harm Tinui. Pulling the trigger, he blew up their vehicle. As he got into his car, he noticed the windshield wipers were frozen. In this blizzard, he would have to smash the glass just to see. The gang was now without transport or weapons, and it would take them a long time to recover. However, since the vehicle had been destroyed, they had likely contacted the ambush team to take action. Tinui's team still had at least 2 hours before they could reach the base. If he didn't intercept them before the attack, the tragedy would repeat itself. Nervous and determined, he decided to take a shortcut through the mountains. He simply had to make it in time.